Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you. As people are joining, go ahead and write your name, your location, and your job role into the chat so we can just get to know who all is here. And we'll go ahead and start in about 4 minutes. Everyone joining us. We're going to get started here in a few minutes, but if you'd like to drop your name and your job title, your role in education, and also your location in the chat, that would be great. Give us an idea of who all is here.
Once everything's perfectly organized, I'll start working on my thesis.
Sorry about that. Our music had a little advertisement. Welcome, Eric. Glad to see you here. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start here in a few minutes, but if you just want to introduce yourself in the chat while we're waiting, that would be great. Leah's going to go ahead and went ahead and put the home-based document in the link, and that will have access to our resources, our slides, and all kinds of other things. Welcome, Jenny. So glad you're here. Ooh, near us, Sacramento. Okay. Awesome. Welcome, Anne. So glad to have you. Glad you're here. Welcome to everyone just joining us. We're going to start in a few minutes here, and the links to the home-based document have been dropped into the chat. Go ahead and open that up while you wait if you'd like. Access to our slides and resources. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Thank you to everyone joining us. Again, we're going to start here in just a couple of minutes. Go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, and go ahead and follow that home-based link to slides and resources as well. I'm going to go ahead and cut the music and get us started here. So we really would like to record this webinar in order to share it with individuals who really expressed interest in attending, but just were unable to join today. So Open Access will be posting this video on our website, and we just want to make sure we have everyone's permission to proceed with our recording. Let's put it this way. If anyone protests, why don't you go ahead and put that in the chat? Might be an easier way to do that. All right, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. Welcome to our Inclusive Learning Circle series, fostering synergy between UDL, AT, and AAC. Today's topic is going to be Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, and removing barriers. My name is Emily Desjardins, and I am the UDL content lead for Open Access. For those of you who don't know Open Access team, we are a pretty small but mighty team. Troy Tickle is our executive leader of Open Access. Leah and Lori are the coordinators of the project. And then we have 3 content lead specialists in the area of UDL, AT, and AAC. And then we have our amazing assistant, administrative assistant, Mel. So Open Access is one of the statewide special education resource leads within the statewide system of support. We are grounded in the foundational belief that with access to quality instruction, all students can engage, actively participate, and learn with inclusive settings. What makes our project unique is that we highlight the importance of learning and participation for all through universal design for learning, assistive technology, and augmentative and alternative communication. You can bookmark our website to easily access some free universal resources for educators and administrators designed to support the implementation of UDL, AT, and AAC. So feel free to click the image in our slides here for our 1-page flyer, which details our 3-tiered approach to assisting LEAs and SELPAs statewide. Our ultimate goal is really to establish some showcase sites across the state to highlight inclusive practices in action, and we're currently collaborating with 4 districts to create UDL showcase sites and with 1 district to develop an accessibility showcase site focused on AAC. At Open Access, we are really committed to the principles of UDL and making this presentation and all of our trainings as accessible as possible. So a few of our strategies include closed captioning, which right now through your Zoom, you can access at the bottom of your page if you want to click closed captioning, and then you'll have your own individual closed captioning that will even tell you who's saying what, which is pretty cool. We do our best to create simple backgrounds with high contrast text, shortened links, alternative text for images, and examples and non-examples, as well as options for opportunities and feedback. So our website is right now linked here, as well as our home-based document. You can use the QR code or the tiny URL to access that, and it's also being dropped in the chat as well. We are always monitoring the chat for questions and comments, and we also love to see your reactions, so please make sure to use those. And we really appreciate your participation throughout this. You can also use the Q&A feature, so we might not be able to fully stop and answer complex questions during the middle of the presentation, but we really will try and address them at some point. We really want to welcome all of you today. We appreciate your time today as we delve into this topic of removing barriers with UDL. With all of our professional learning sessions and meetings, we like to start with something called an inclusive welcome. We did not make this term up, and it's actually one of the signature practices from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learnings. There are many different ways to do this practice, but today we're going to be discussing a topic using a Padlet and the chat. So the UDL guidelines have existed for 30 years. And although the primary function of the guidelines has remained mostly the same, there was a major update to the guidelines this July. The UDL 3.0 updates were rolled out with many new ways to help remove barriers for our learners. And we'll be digging into that in just a bit. But for now, we're going to focus on one of the most fun updates within UDL 3.0, which is the addition of the consideration, nurture, joy, and play. These UDL 3.0 guidelines or updates were created over 5 years of reviewing the most updated neuroscience on how humans learn best. One of the key findings was that in order for humans to truly learn, they need to experience joy in their learning. Nicole Tucker-Smith, who is the founder of LessonCast and a key contributor to the creation of the UDL 3.0 guidelines, says that research shows there are 5 primary ways that people find joy in learning. When they have the opportunity to explore and discover, when they feel like their part of our identity is being represented and they can connect to materials in themselves, when we have the opportunity to connect with others while learning, when we have the opportunity to shine as experts, and when we get to experience play while learning. So today's inclusive welcome is to consider when you have experienced joy in your learning. You're welcome to make your own post within our Padlet, or you can also react to other posts that already exist. For those of you who have never used a Padlet before, at the very bottom down here, you can click, and there are many different options. You can absolutely just write a little message here with nothing fancy or specific. That's totally fine. You can record your voice, record a video, draw a little picture. This is a fun little feature. You can click the I can't draw and you can write a description of something that you would like an image generated for you. You can create a poll. You can search for a GIF or an image that represents your thoughts and then write something here. So again, you're welcome to create your own, but you also can react on some of these or comment on maybe a time that you experienced joy through play and add your comment. So we'll take a few minutes and you can go ahead and update your Padlet, react there. Or another option, if you'd prefer not to use the Padlet, is go ahead and drop it in the chat. When was a time that you experienced joy in learning? I'm going to go back to this and let it refresh.
Emily, there's a question in the chat about not being able to see where to click to use the Padlet. Do you want to review that?
Absolutely. So hopefully you have the link is in the chat, and at the very bottom here, hopefully you can see it on the screen, there's a blue plus sign. So if you click, then you can either write a message or it'll give you the option to attach something to your writing. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh, I see some that are hidden. Oh, got this. I'm gonna move these up so people can see. Awesome. I experienced joy when I learned new music in my choir, loved science experiments in school, discovery, exploration and discovery. Awesome. Oh, there's an audio clip here. That's so exciting. Oh, they're all piling up. That's funny that it does that. Sorry about that. All right. I've gained validation through some of the reading and research I've been able to organize in my learning journal. That's awesome. The mind remembers what the hand does. I loved drawing. Fantastic. Joy when collaborating with peers to learn about nature-based education for children with extensive support needs. Learning through song. Oh, I love this. Fantastic.
We also have Tatiana shared that she experienced a lot of joy from learning when she was given freedom to be creative in writing rather than given a specific topic or prompt to write about.
Love that. Yes, fantastic. There's recent research that shows that if you want to know how the true ability of someone's writing, and it's giving them options for creativity and allowing them to choose their topic. I love that. Thank you guys so much for sharing this. This is fantastic. All right. We'll go ahead and dive on in. So during our inclusive learning circle today, we're going to focus on the barriers addressed with the UDL 3.0 updates, which again just happened this summer in July. We're going to discuss some of the common barriers that we see with UDL implementation for teachers, and then we're going to introduce a tool and a trick that might help you remove some barriers within planning and learning. So the primary goal of updating the UDL guidelines was really to dig deeper into the barriers that learners are facing and attempt to find a way to remove even more of those barriers utilizing the most updated neuroscience. So the updated or the update was really focused on addressing the systematic barriers to learning opportunities and outcomes. And the guidelines were really updated in a community-driven fashion, and that input was provided from people all across the world before finally being fully finalized into these guidelines. The overarching updates within UDL 3.0 focus on emphasizing identity as part of that learner variability. So the guidelines have always had considerations focused on the what, the why, and the how of learning. But based on research, CAST, who's the creator of the UDL guidelines, determined that the who is also so important within learning. And again, these updates were created over 5 years of diving into the most current neuroscience on how humans learn. And a large focus was really on the importance of people feeling seen within their educational setting and materials. And as Alison Posey, who is a neuroscience with CAST, says, learning is first and foremost emotional. And I think you can see the addition of that learner-centered language throughout the entire guidelines, and that focus on the learner and identity and the importance around that. The updates also have included acknowledging the individual, institutional, and systemic barriers, a bias as a barrier within classrooms and the educational system itself, and then again, a real emphasis on that collective learning. With the focus on identity within the updates, it's really important to explore our own identity as part of learner variability. So there are several factors which contribute to our identity. And although we're able to find commonalities and create categories to help shape our identity, there's also variability in how we value those attributes. And that ultimately impacts the way they show up in a learning space. So in this variability wheel here, or this identity wheel, I'm sorry, the inner circle of the identity wheel identifies gender, physical abilities, qualities, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and race. The outer ring explores even more categories such as marital status, communication styles, education, socioeconomic status, military experience, religious beliefs, etc. So all of us have truly different factors within us that contribute to our identities. And we might have portions of our identity that we connect with now more than we did as children, and vice versa. Our identity is really our sense of self. It's what makes us unique and has continuity over time. And it can include our family, our cultural background, our physical features, but also our values, our morals, and our beliefs. One of the new considerations in this guideline, in the updated guidelines, is to represent a diversity of perspectives and identities in authentic ways. Perhaps the easiest way to do this in a classroom is really to create voice for our students and opportunities for them to showcase themselves. This addition of identity within the guidelines is such a great reminder of how important the connection of learners in the classroom is. And when we have respect and honor for our differences, it can really make for an amazing learning environment. So I want to show a quick video that provides one way that a teacher represents diversity and identity in a really authentic way and allows her students to show and lead with their identity. Feel free to share any thoughts or responses to the video in the chat.
Identity is what makes you who you are. Race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, all your identity markers shape how you perceive the world, but also shape how others perceive you. So identity work in a classroom is very important because it builds a level of trust. Students feel safe to be who they are. Identity portraits are a project that allows kids to express their own identities. Basically, I give them a piece of paper. I give them colored pencils, markers, crayons, and I tell them that they're going to draw a portrait of themselves. They draw like their head and their shoulders. And then they draw a line down the middle of their face. Then I tell them to color one side, like the skin tone, the jacket or shirt that they're wearing. And then on the other side, I want them to add in their identity markers. And kids kind of tell their own story. They tell me who they are through a picture. One of the things that kids take away from our discussions is the difference between visible and invisible identity markers. If you walked up to somebody in the mall could you tell that they are in a certain identity group? So people can see that I wear glasses, so that would be signifying that I have a disability. My skin color could be a signifier as far as my racial or my ethnic identity. Invisible markers, those are ones that either the person likes to keep hidden or that you just are unsure of. One invisible identity that I stress is mental health. A lot of people, you don't know that they're bipolar, depressed, those types of things. I talk about ethnicity, languages spoken, also race sometimes because some people are mixed race. We talk about religion. You don't know who somebody worships when you see them walking down the street. Also, we have a lot of great conversations about sexual orientation and the spectrum of gender. And so then we talk about perceptions of people and how when we assume, our biases and our prejudices creep in at the same time. After we finish the identity portraits, I put their projects on the wall so they see them every day and know that all those identities are accepted in this place. It's a really big growth point for a lot of kids that they are able to be comfortable with who they are and recognize and respect the identity markers of anybody.
Does anyone want to share anything that they've maybe seen in classrooms where students were given opportunities to lead with their identity, like something like this? And it can be small things too. You know, I was actually in a classroom a week ago, and I saw the coolest thing that was just so simple, but to me stood out as letting children lead with their identity. And it was a little kindergarten birthday chart with all the months of the year, and under each month was every child took their own handprint, they picked their own color paper, and there were 10 different skin colors to choose from, and they traced their hands, they wrote their name, and they drew a little self-portrait of themselves, and it was underneath, like in the classroom. Just such a simple way to show, like, oh, my birthday is right here, but that connection to identity, and I made this, and this is how I see myself, and this is how I can cut. And it was just great. I loved that small piece of identity in the classroom. Another way that the UDL 3.0 guideline really works to remove barriers is by addressing biases. And I think it's really worth pointing out that the idea of addressing biases is listed in all three of the principles: engagement, representation, and action and expression. So address biases, threats, and distractions, address biases in the use of language and symbols, and address biases related to modes of expression and communication. And it's important to note that we all have biases, and that's actually just a human survival strategy. So it's not something to deny or feel embarrassed about at all, but just something to acknowledge and find some strategies to move forward. And one of the strategies is just kind of listening, being open-minded, acknowledging, and then kind of thinking about it, considering it. If it's something that, you know, there's something you do want to change. So some examples of common biases that you might not actually have considered as obvious in products and process is, you know, learning by reading a physical text is more advanced or more valuable than using speech-to-text software on a digital text. Mental math calculations show mastery better than drawing or using visuals. Writing to demonstrate understanding is more challenging than speaking. Or drawing or using digital media to demonstrate understanding. Art made with paints is better than art made with digital art. Working independently is more complex than working with others, or working with others is more complex than working solo. Do any of these surprise you as biases, or can you think of others that you might have experienced yourself or seen in the classroom? Feel free to drop some in the chat. Finally, the biggest change in UDL 3.0 is that the ultimate goal is no longer to create expert learners. The very word expert carries a lot of bias within it, as if there is an expert way to achieve a goal or task, rather than many amazing ways to achieve a goal. So the language of learner agency as the ultimate goal of UDL really empowers our learners to feel in control of their education and hopefully empowers educators to take some of the load off of themselves and create opportunities for learners to make choices about their education. These pictures are probably not new to you, but some of them might have been changed a little bit. In the first picture, you see that everyone has the same. Regardless of what they need, they all get the same stool. In the second, students get exactly what they need to access the field. In the third picture, the entire barrier or visual block has simply been removed, and there are tools available next to them in case they choose to use them, really providing opportunities for that agency. Tools are available for all, but learners themselves get to choose whether they need to utilize them rather than teachers making that decision for them. And this agency really comes from our learners knowing themselves, knowing what engages them, knowing what tools help them perceive and understand, and knowing how to organize and communicate their learning. Oh, I'm looking in the chat. Those biases are still present. Yes, indeed, they are. Many teachers still have biases with text-to-speech and audiobooks for sure, as well as text-to-speech. Absolutely, they do exist. So working to remove some of those barriers by just increasing our education and implementation of UDL. Absolutely. So moving along with this idea of removing barriers, I think it's really important to consider what barriers that educators face when they decide they would like to implement UDL. The two most common barriers that we encounter when it comes to implementing UDL in classrooms is that we find that a lot of teachers have a desire to implement, but they aren't really sure where to start. And it all sounds very daunting and it seems kind of big. And then also overwhelmed by just not having enough time. Of course, we could all use more time, no question. So as with anything, our greatest recommendation is really to start small. And one way you can start small is by utilizing a method called the +1 method. So James McKenna is from an organization called CCEE, or the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, which is a statewide system of support resource. He recommends the +1 approach, which when you're not quite sure where to start. So the approach is really summarized by first picking a lesson, second, considering your students. The third is to identify the pinch point. And a pinch point is, where are your learners getting stuck? If this is a new lesson and you've never done it before, where do you think they might get stuck? Consider that barrier and change one thing, just one thing. Then deliver, observe, and reflect. Repeat this process over and over. And as you continue this process, you might start changing two things, or three things. And slowly but surely, you're gonna build your practice. Like with anything, slowly but surely, and small changes make enormous difference. So let's look at some pinch points that could create some barriers. So these barriers might all depend on what the firm goal of the activity is. But when we start with the firm goals and flexible means, it can really assist us in determining where barriers might exist. So some examples might be requiring students to work with a partner. Some of our students may have so much social anxiety that they really cannot fully express their knowledge or understanding about a topic because they're so focused on the social aspect of the activity. That's not to say they don't need to practice socializing, but if the goal of the lesson or activity is to show understanding on a math skill, you might want to eliminate that barrier for them so that they can show their learning about math. Another example might be that grade level text is the only means to get to content knowledge. Of course, we need our students to be able to read, but if the goal is to understand information, again, let's eliminate that barrier and allow them to other means of perceiving that information. Another possible barrier might be only one way to demonstrate their understanding of content. So let's look at some +1 options for learners to engage in their learning. Rather than requiring students to work with a partner, maybe the +1 is just to add a choice to work independently or in a small group or with a partner. Perhaps your +1 options for learners to perceive their learning in different ways, instead of just a grade level text as the only means to get their content knowledge. Perhaps you offer different levels of text provided, an audio recording of the text, video explaining content, or perhaps a teacher reads the text with a small group and explains vocabulary. And again, just one of those. These are lots of ideas, but you can just add one, +1. Some +1 options for learners to act on their learning. Rather than one way to show their understanding, the +1 options could be including time for goal setting and reflection throughout the process, provide a planning template, criteria, chart, rubric, and a choice to demonstrate understanding orally, in writing, or using digital tools. So the UDL guidelines provide us with suggestions of ways to minimize barriers in learning experiences. And we can really use that to anticipate those barriers. You could help minimize barriers in the areas of engagement, representation, or action and expression by just adding one thing. So hopefully the +1 method is helpful to you. In the home base, I've also linked the video kind of explaining a little bit more about the +1 approach, and also a lesson planning template to utilize the +1 approach if you want to dig into that at a later time. The next resource that we'd like to introduce to you is a tool that might also help you remove some barriers to implementation. So Ludia is a UDL-focused AI-powered chat that can help you implement UDL in your classroom in so many amazing ways. For one, Ludia can truly help you save time by helping you generate resources you can utilize in your classroom. But also Ludia can be your brainstorming buddy and help you just generate some ideas for how to create some engaging lessons. Here's a list of a few ways that you might be able to use Ludia to remove some barriers, and then I'm going to do a little demonstration and just show you some things I've asked it and how it's responded. You can provide a Common Core standard and ask Ludia to break it down into lesson goals and then create student-friendly goals, kind of connects to that firm goals, flexible means. Request some ideas for how to make lessons more engaging. You can give an upcoming lesson and ask it to predict your learners' potential barriers. You can input your learning goal and ask for ideas how to provide choice and give ideas for tools to offer to all students. You can input environmental barriers and request specific accommodation ideas for students within the environment. Another thing we were playing with just yesterday was putting in IEP goals and asking it to create data sheets in the form of rubrics. And that was really cool. So for any of you special educators out there, it can do that as well. So I'm going to show you what I did was I kind of went through the chat experience and asked it a bunch of different questions. And I intentionally asked it things that I don't think it would have understood me asking very well. So I could kind of show you how I clarify, because the thing I have learned from using this is the more specific you can be with your question, the better. And sometimes if you don't like the way it responds, try just adjusting your question slightly and it can give a totally different response. Fun fact about AI that I'm just learning as I'm exploring all of this is that even if you ask it the same question, it will not always give you the same answer. So just like having a conversation with a human, you might get a similar answer, but it's never going to be identical, which is very interesting. Okay, so I started out by asking, can you please give some strategies to remove barriers for my third grade students during the lesson goal? And this is a third grade writing goal, writing a persuasive paragraph. And so it kind of gives some multiple means of representation options, flexible modes for expression, engagement, and interest. At the bottom of every response, it gives you 3 or 4 follow-up questions. So I clicked a couple of those so you could see. Let's focus on those graphic organizers. And so it gives some ideas of graphic organizers. It cannot generate a graphic organizer in like a circle form, which is interesting, but it can do tables. So it can actually create a table, but it kind of creates these funky things when you ask for a Venn diagram, which is interesting. It gives some examples of digital graphic organizer tools, comparing and contrasting these tools. I'm trying to get to the good questions here. Okay. So it kind of sent me on a sidetrack because it kept giving me all of these options of questions. And so I clicked those for fun. But then I said, back to the third grade lesson with this learning goal. Could you please create a choice board of options for how my students might be able to show their learning? And it generated this amazing choice board. And I said, okay, this is great, but I think this is too many choices. Can you please change this choice board to have 3 options total that still meets, oh, I did a typo, but it understood, meets their diverse learning needs. And so it came up with this: write a paragraph, create a poster, or record a video. And again, if my goal were to have my students understand how to generate a topic sentence, 3 supporting details, and a concluding sentence that persuaded someone to do something, then I wouldn't necessarily need them to handwrite that. And so having these options would be something I want them to do. If your goal includes something with handwriting, then maybe these aren't your options, and that's okay. I think the piece with UDL that's really important is teachers are in control of the choices they offer students. So don't feel like you have to offer X, Y, or Z choice. If it doesn't meet the learning goal, that's fine. Okay. Then I said, this is fantastic. Can you please create a checklist rubric for me to grade this? And it created a rubric. And then I said, can you please create a holistic single point rubric for this lesson instead? And it created this lovely rubric. I have before, I didn't in this chat, I have specifically said, can you add a section on this rubric to include, and it will add that for you as well. Can you give examples with the single point holistic rubric? And it will give examples of what a student's paragraph could look like to either meet expectations or perhaps be a little vague and not quite be meeting expectations. What other criteria could be added to this rubric? And then it added some other criteria. Okay, so then I kind of reset and went back to some new questions. Can you please take the 7th grade Common Core standard and break it into smaller lesson goals? Okay, so this is a 7th grade math standard. Recognize and represent proportional relationships between quantities, okay? So it made 6 small lessons. And then I said, can you please take these lesson goals and write them in student-friendly language using the frame I will be able to. It did student-friendly language for me another time, and I didn't like the wording of it. So if you provide a sentence frame for how you want it, or the more details you can give it, the cooler the output ends up becoming. Okay. And then it's got student-friendly language. Can you provide some examples for engaging lessons to teach each of these lessons? And so for each one, it gives me different ideas: a ratio scavenger hunt, graphing proportional relationships, equation creation relay. That's fun. All kinds of fun things. What barriers might my 7th graders face with this standard? And some may struggle with the foundational concept of ratios. And then there's some strategies to support. So there's really an endless amount of ways to use this. I just kind of wanted to highlight a few ways that I used it. Let's see. Okay, can you provide specific strategies on how to teach my students to provide peer feedback? Oh, this came up just recently in a training of like wanting to provide feedback to 35 students, but not feeling like they could do that. And, you know, we kind of talked about the importance of utilizing peer feedback and teaching each other or teaching our students how to provide quality feedback in that period between we can't quite get to everyone, but they're still getting feedback on their work. And so they gave this a really nice step-by-step process of ways to support students. And then I said, can you please create a checklist visual for my students to use when providing peer feedback, complete with sentence starters for them? So this is like a checklist criteria of things to look at when students are looking at each other's work, and some sentence starters for positive feedback and also for construction feedback. And it gives a little checklist: read the work, use the checklist, provide feedback, and be respectful and supportive. And so we took this and we copied it and made a cute little chart that hopefully she'll be able to use in her classroom. So a lot of fun things that you can do with Ludia. All the things. That was my demo time, I realized. So And I would love to open it up for any questions right now. Any questions you have on anything? UDL 3.0 guideline updates, anything with the +1 method, with Ludia, here for it all. Open access, all the things. Ooh, great question. Any difference between Ludia and ChatGPT? It's a great question. So I've kind of played around with if ChatGPT could do the same things as Ludia, and I've actually pulled them up and put things in. ChatGPT can do a lot. Ludia is specifically trained in the area of universal design for learning, and so Ludia's responses can be a little more specific with UDL. I forgot to mention that Ludia is completely free as well. They do have a subscriber, you can upgrade to like a subscription, but what's interesting is I don't know so they say there's a certain limit of how many questions you can ask in a given day. I have yet to hit that, and I am telling you about something, a lot of questions in a given day. And so I think the free version is pretty expansive. If you did subscribe, you might get slightly more details. Tyler, that is a really good question. I don't actually know that. It's kind of the name of I think Sarah's right. It's the name of the chat bot. So like when you open it up, it says that's just the name of the site. Or the chat bot. I don't know. I don't know a lot about AI, guys. I'll be honest. I'm in my learning phase. Can you ask Ludia about specific AT tools? Yes, if you give me a question, I'll ask it right now. What kind of specific AT tool? Let's play around with it. Let's do it. I love this. Oh, it is not my Placer, my PCOE account. That's really funny. No, it's just part of Ludia. I love that. Okay, we'll come up with something. I use Google Chrome. What is a good text-to-speech tool to help my students access their game? See what it says, real time. Natural Reader. Is this a free resource? I feel like that's very important. Offers paid and free. Okay. Has anyone had any experience with Natural Reader? I'm not actually sure if that's a winner or not. I don't know about that one. Oh, nice. Okay. It's a Chrome extension. Awesome. To modify curriculum I have not, that is a really, Sandra, that's a great idea. Using Ludia to modify curriculum or assignments for full inclusion teachers. That would be a really cool thing to try out. Let's see. Okay. I think if you had a specific learning goal that you wanted to pop in there or a specific assignment, you could ask for it. That's definitely worth playing around with. I have not done that specifically. I have told it before. I was working with a teacher who's in a students with multiple disabilities classroom. And so I just did this whole paragraph that was like, I teach high school students who have severe multiple disabilities, and this is what we're working on, boom. And it was like, thank you for giving me your context. Now I can help you better. It kind of gave some suggestions. So I do think it's one of those, the more information you could give. I have a student that's struggling with X, Y, and Z, etc. Will it make visual representations or graphs from story problems in math? That's a cool idea. This is awesome. You guys are giving me a lot of great ideas too. I've been putting things into this, the more, things as things come up. And so that hasn't quite come up yet, but I wonder if it will. Let me think about how I want to ask that. You should be able to provide modifications based on the prompt you give it. if it's using different Gen AI sources. I would guess so. Yeah, I would definitely guess so. Okay. Generating a word problem, literally off the top of my head here. Let's see. Mark has 3 apples and Susie gives him 4 more. How many apples are there all together? That's a pretty simple one. I know I could do something a lot more extensive, but we're just going to roll with this. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, didn't know it could do that. That's awesome. It's doing cool things, guys. Yeah. I would say the rubric thing has been really cool to play around with. If you're putting in, another barrier that comes up a lot is, okay, if I'm offering all these choices to my students, how the heck do I grade all that? And so to have a tool that can help you make a rubric to grade several different assignments all at once, matching that same learning goal is huge and super helpful. Let's see. And you can always see at the bottom, there's always different. Great question, Sandra. Can you copy that and paste it in a Google Doc? So you can copy and paste it, but if it does have a table, the table does not copy and paste. I kind of wonder if that's something that's maybe in the paid version. I'm not so sure. So you can copy and paste it into a Google Doc. If there's a table, I create a table in my Google Doc with exactly the spaces I need, and I just go space by space. It's a pain, but also it takes me an extra 30 seconds and I have a whole rubric ready to go. So I appreciate you asking that question because that is kind of a caveat to the copy and paste piece. And at the bottom here, ask some questions for like, okay, create a similar visual for a subtraction word problem. Okay, let's do it. And so it can kind of give you some prompts for, oh, that's fun. Okay. Do a lot of fun things with this. Awesome. Any other questions we might have? I would most certainly encourage you to play around with this and just kind of see what you can use it for. Make it fit your role. Jen and I were playing a little bit, very, very small amount. We're playing a little bit with AAC specific questions. And I was one writing the question, so I don't think it was very helpful. But I think if an AAC specialist put the questions in, you might get better answers. But because it's not my background, mine were a little too general. So I'd be curious if anyone's ends up putting that in, what they get out. I wonder if you put in a reading section, if it will make a picture to represent the story. Concerned about a cabin in a plane where some kids picture a log cabin instead of a plane cabin. Interesting. That would be really cool. I'm not sure. That would be a really cool thing to try out. If you have something you want me to put in, I will totally put it in. Do you want me to try this cabin in a plane thing? That would be kind of cool. Story from experience where kids drew pics where I was reading. Got it. Cool. That's really cool. So you're reading the story and then kids are drawing along. That's really fun. Huh. That's really cool. I know that some people have used it to summarize chapters of storybooks at specific grade levels. That's really cool. Awesome. So many great things. Specific reading levels. I totally got it. I knew what you meant. Oh. All right. Ooh. Okay, we're going to try this. Jenny, we're trying it out. Draw a picture of this sentence. The man was pouring a drink in the cabin in the plane Flying far above the land. It did not. Let's see if I can be more specific. Ooh. I'm gonna try one more time. And like sometimes it's stuff I'm not expecting, but it really, let's see, can you please create a visual representation? No, it does not appear to do that. That sure would be cool though. It gives you some ideas, but yes, will not create it. It's language based. Yeah, Sarah, you're right. Canva's AI generator might be better for this specifically. Cool. How do you get it to draw a picture otherwise? That's a good question. Honestly, that word problem picture was the first time I've seen a picture. Like it will do graphic organizers, it will do tables, but it seems like anytime you have to do different shapes, like I asked it to draw a Venn diagram one time and it was very weird. Like it kind of looked like computer programming jargon. Oh, wow. It zoomed right on into that. Didn't mean to do that. Trying to go back to that part where it kind of looked like computer jargon. It just like couldn't quite generate something that looked great. Well, I can't get there. That's okay. Any other questions from anybody? I really appreciate all your questions and the excitement around this. That's very exciting. All right. With all of our professional learning sessions and meetings, we also like to end with something called our intentional close. Just like with our inclusive welcome, we certainly didn't make this term up at all. And it's also a signature practice from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So there are many different ways to do this practice, but our intentional close today is going to be a fun game called Suit Yourself. You can pick any of these card connected responses to think about our time together. You can choose the heart card and respond to the prompt. How did you feel during our session? What did it mean to you? You can choose the diamond prompt and share some of the gems of wisdom you might have gathered from the material or the collaboration. The club prompt is to consider what grew for you today. And then that spade prompt is what did our conversation dig up for you? We're going to go ahead and spend a couple minutes just dropping those in the chat. Let's see. Okay. There's probably other tools. Is there other ones besides Canva? I'd be curious. I think you probably can get some pretty good images from ChatGPT as well. AI image generators, one called Crayon. Oh, Crayon, get it? AI in the middle. Love that. Crayon. Okay, that's really funny. I don't think you can. You need to use a tool geared toward AI image generation. And as you guys are thinking of your card responses, I'm going to do a little plug here for our next upcoming learning circles. Our next two are on December 18th, focusing on AT tools and trends, and then January 22nd, focusing on AAC in elementary and middle school. Awesome. So many great responses. Learned about Ludia and already bookmark it to explore and to share with teachers you work with. Excellent, Heather. I'm so glad. Tried Ludia for creating pictures for word problem. Jenny, I'm so excited about this. I had no idea that was the thing it would do. I'm thrilled. Awesome. Thinking about how to utilize Ludia for speech and language therapy sessions. Oh, I love this. Guys, if you use Ludia in cool new ways that I did not, or even the same ways, please feel free to send me a message. My contact information should be somewhere around here. And if not, I'll put it in the chat, but I would love to hear about the things you're using it for, because it is one of those things that it's so deep and there's so much to explore that you don't know until you try it, but that could be a game changer. Sandra, I feel you. I was very hesitant about AI and I was very intimidated by all of it. Then once I saw the things it could do, it was like, oh, wow. Okay, there's a lot of good that could come out of this if we use it in a very intentional and thoughtful way and use it to help children and learners and not for the scary ways it could be used. Spade, I get it. I totally get it. It was super helpful to take a look at the different prompts. Awesome. Ludia, I'm so glad everyone liked Ludia. That's fantastic. Oh, thank you, Leah, for putting that in there. I appreciate it. Heather, I agree. AI can be used for good. That's awesome. Oh, Sarah, thank you. We will check that out for sure. Thank you guys so much for your responses. I really appreciate it. So in the last few minutes that we have together, please, we ask that you take a couple minutes just to complete our feedback survey and tell us about how today went for you. Again, our next two inclusive learning circles are going to be December 18th, focusing on AT tools and trends, and then January 22nd, focusing on AAC and in elementary and middle school. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the flyer in the chat, and you can see all the rest of the dates of our inclusive learning circles. We also very much encourage you to please follow us on social media. We do update it regularly. We do Tip Tuesdays. We do Fun Fact Fridays. We share lots of our events and things that are going on, all that fun stuff. Ooh, lots of good responses here. Ooh, I like that. How to get others to buy in or understand the benefits of UDL and supports for all students. Awesome. Thank you so much for passing it on to your teachers. I appreciate that. Thank you guys so very much. Adobe Express is also working to make a comeback. That's awesome. Ooh, Jill likes it. Awesome. She's our AT specialist, so that most certainly means it's probably a good tool if she's endorsing it. Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Rudy. We appreciate you being here. Thank you, Christina. Thanks, Jill. Awesome. I'm so glad the demo that you guys liked it. That's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you.